Okay, let's dive into this. We're about to crack open a case file that's nearly 2,000 years old. It's a Talmudic investigation, but trust me, this isn't some dry religious text. It reads more like a high-stakes legal procedural. The scene of the crime? The ancient temple in Jerusalem. And the mystery? How to properly serve the divine when every single tiny detail matters.
So just try to imagine you're a priest in the sacred space. For you, precision isn't just about, following a bunch of rules. It's the very thing that connects you to the sacred. One wrong move, one tiny little deviation, and the whole service could be invalidated. I mean, talk about pressure, right? The level of detail they're working with is just staggering.
So, let's open our first case file. This one revolves around a question that seems almost deceptively simple, but as you'll see, it just unfolds into this fascinating logical puzzle. Where exactly is a priest allowed to stand?
The core principle here is what we'll call the sacred floor rule, and the logic is actually built on a really neat analogy. The idea is, just like nothing can come between a priest and his holy vestments, the clothes that literally make him holy, well, then nothing can come between his feet and the holy ground of the temple floor. It's all about that direct, unbroken contact with sanctity.
Now, the text doesn't just give us the rule and call it a day. Of course not. It gives 3 very specific examples of what counts as a prohibited interposition. You can't stand on a vessel, you can't stand on an animal, and you can't even stand on another person's feet. Now, you might be thinking, okay, isn't that a little redundant? But this is where the real genius of the logic starts to shine through.
So why all 3? Well, because each one is specifically designed to close a potential loophole. Think about it. If the rule only said you can't stand on a vessel, some clever person might argue, aha, but an animal is made of flesh. That's totally different. Okay, so the rule adds animals. But then that same person could say, all right, but what about a fellow priest? He's part of the holy service. Surely standing on his feet is okay. Nope, the text closes that loophole too. It's this beautiful, methodical process of creating a completely airtight legal definition.
But the investigation doesn't just stop once the rule is clear. No way. The next and maybe most exciting step for these ancient thinkers was to push that rule to its absolute limits. So let's see how they take this foundational principle and just stress test it with some incredible what-if scenarios.
First up, we get this really practical test from Rabbi Eliezer for those tricky borderline cases. Let's say a priest has one foot on a forbidden object, but his other foot is firmly on the sacred floor. Is the service valid? Well, Rabbi Eliezer proposes this simple physical test. If you could just yank that object away and the priest could still stay standing on his one foot, then the service is valid. Why? Because it proves his primary connection, his stability, is with the holy floor. It's about a genuine connection, not just some technicality.
And this, of course, leads to an even tougher question. This one from Rabbi Ami. What if the thing the priest is standing on is supposed to be part of the floor, but it's come loose? Picture a single stone tile that's wobbling around. It's meant to be part of the floor, but at this moment, it's not properly attached. Does that count as an interposition? Is the intention for it to be part of the floor enough to make it count?
And then the question gets even deeper, even more profound. What if a stone tile is completely gone, and the priest just stands in the empty space, right on the dirt underneath? This raises this huge question about the very nature of holiness itself. When the temple was sanctified, was it just the stone tiles on the surface that became holy? Or did that sanctity soak all the way down to the very depths of the earth?
And the answer to that? Well, the text just leaves it unresolved. And this is so important because it gives us a key insight into how these thinkers operated. Sometimes the whole point wasn't just to find a simple, easy answer. The point was to ask the right question, to explore the absolute boundaries of an idea, and to really grapple with the profound principles that were at stake.
All right, let's close that case file for now and open up a brand new one. We're going to shift gears from where the priest stands to how the priest acts. And for this next investigation, it all centers on one single, really controversial action: using the left hand. Right out of the gate, the central conflict is laid out for us plain and simple. When it comes to the absolutely crucial act of collecting the sacrificial blood in a vessel, there's a major disagreement. The sages are firm. If the priest uses his left hand, the entire service is invalid. Done. But another huge authority, Rabbi Shimon, says, no, it's perfectly valid. So we've got 2 highly respected opinions in direct opposition. What's going on here?
Now, here's what's so fascinating.
Both sides, both the sages and Rabbi Shimon, build their entire case on this one single piece of textual evidence from the book of Leviticus. The verse mentions three things: taking the blood, using a finger, and putting the blood on the altar. So how on earth can two completely opposite views come from the exact same words?
This is where the real detective work begins. We're now going to follow this incredible chain of logic as generations of later rabbis analyze, debate, and try to reconstruct the reasoning behind this ancient disagreement. This is like a forensic analysis of an idea.
So, the argument unfolds like this brilliant intellectual puzzle. First, a scholar named Rabbi Yehuda steps up. He suggests Rabbi Shimon's reasoning is simple. The verse doesn't explicitly say right hand, so the left hand must be fine. Makes sense. But then, Rabbah immediately jumps in and pokes a hole in that theory. He points out that if that were true, you should also be allowed to place the blood with the left hand, and everyone agrees that's wrong. So then Rabbah offers a more clever, practical theory. You can't physically collect blood with just a finger, so the word finger in the verse must only apply to the act of placing it. It's a great attempt, but it's about to be blown out of the water by the final, breakthrough insight from a scholar named Abaye.
This is the moment. Abba has this incredible realization that everyone has been looking in completely the wrong place. The disagreement isn't about hands or fingers or what's practical. It's about something much, much more fundamental. It's about the basic rules of how you read a sentence.
Abaye's solution is just brilliant. He says the entire debate, this whole long-standing argument, doesn't hinge on theology. It hinges on grammar. It all comes down to this. Do you read a qualifying phrase in a verse as applying forwards and backwards, or only forwards? The sages believe the key word, finger, which is in the middle of the sentence, applies to the action mentioned before it, take, and the action mentioned after it, put. But Rabbi Shimon believes a modifier only applies to what comes immediately after it.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. For the sages, their read forwards and backwards rule means finger, and by extension, the right hand, applies to both taking and putting. But for Rabbi Shimon, who reads forwards only, finger applies only to putting the blood. That leaves the method for taking it open. The whole complex debate just boils down to a fundamental rule of how you interpret a text. It's so elegant.
So you see, the crucial point is that this was never really just about hands or feet. The meticulous, almost obsessive focus on these little details was actually part of a much bigger, much more ambitious project. It was about building a consistent, a logical, and a transparent system for how to understand the foundational texts of their entire world.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We saw one case where the whole point was the question, not the answer, and we saw another where the answer was really about the process of interpretation. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When does the method we use to find an answer, the logic, the debate, the system we build, become even more important, more meaningful than the specific answer we were looking for in the first place?